Could you come inside for a moment?
The wind blew the door open. I had to shut it.
I thought for a moment you took out the trash.
Are you gonna do XCOM today, or?
I'm thinking so. I wonder what Finland would be like if we had a single police officer and no more.
Whole country, one police officer?
I wonder what it would be like.
Oh.
I mean, for real. I wonder if it would work. I have a hunch it would be a very interesting system.
I found some inspirational Star Trek speeches that were really moving.
Okay.
I posted it to the forum.
Still haven't changed your title on the forum.
That's all right.
Yeah. Antro officer.
Yeah.
I've been outside more this year than probably the last 3 years put together. Well, actually, I was homeless once, so I was outside a lot then, so it's probably more out then than right now. Damn it, mosquito managed to bit me.
You have to twist it.
Oh, this part comes like this. Oh, nice. Nice.
What? Oh.
It's very full. It's very full. Thank you, this will last me a few days. I'm gonna check the bank account today and see if they've sent the money with the check. They should, but you can never be sure. If they haven't sent it, I'll send them an email and contact them and see what the problem is. But since the check is only the address, it should have gone through. But it's possible that it costs so much that it's not like available, you know what I mean? But that seems a little unlikely. Because I had like 450 in my account in euros and I sent $400, so it should have gone through.
Yeah. Do they mind if you have a little bit left over at the end of the month?
No. A little bit is fine, but if you start to like save or create a secondary bank account or do anything of that nature, like buy stocks or something, they demand that you sell it before they'll pay you more. Not absolutely sure how they'll do that if you are on sick leave instead of Social Security, but it should be the same. Have you been keeping a tab on the Epstein situation?
Epstein?
You know the guy Epstein?
No.
Okay, he was one of those high-ranking businessmen in the US who got caught in the scandal of underage sex, and he was organizing flights for like US citizens and like senators and such for them to fly to Central America to have sex with children, and he got caught with it. And he's facing like a lifetime in prison. It was, in my view, speaking as a delinquent in this particular manner, it was too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even in my view, it was a little bit too much. I dislike it when people do that when it's still illegal, especially when the rich guys do that when it's still illegal.
Was he part of NAMBLA?
I don't know. I don't think so. North American Man Boy Love Association.
They made fun of that on South Park or something.
Yeah, I heard it. I think it was in South Park or in one of those SNL sketches or something. That's a huge fly. Absolutely gargantuan. So he got caught with it and he's facing like a lifetime in prison.
But if it's legal down there,
yeah, still.
Yeah.
Was this Arabic man in one of those countries where sex is only allowed when you're married that got like married for a couple of hours with the people he was having sex with and then divorced afterwards, and the community smarted up to him, and I think he was punished somehow. I don't remember the exact details of the case, but he had like 800 marriages and was on the main newspaper in Finland as one of those like other culture weirdos, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the community smarted up to him. I used to get NAMBLA and NIMBY confused with each other. That was weird. I think even though I would be benefiting like hugely if the LGBT movement got like a lot of support, you know what I mean? Because I'm in the minorities, I still think that they're pushing too fast, too much, you know what I mean? I still think that the fact that, for example, that they're against the straight pride parade, I understand that it's basically a middle finger to the LGBT community, the whole straight pride thing, but I still think they should support it, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I still think they should support it instead of like saying that it's an unrequired thing. They should be in favor of it, like they should in general be in favor of other people expressing their culture, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Is it the right wing that's doing straight pride?
Yeah, it's a very right-wing thing. It's gonna have like 10 participants and 15,000 opposition people around it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I still think the LGBT community should absolutely support the straight pride, just to like be equal in the manner, but I think they're not gonna do it because they think that it's against them, which is stupid. And I really, really hate when gay people say that straight people have never been oppressed by gays. I really hate that. They really don't know their history, you know what I mean? and I loathe that. And there are a few other things, like women saying that they've always been oppressed by men and stuff like that. And it's in the same camp when people say that cannabis has never killed anyone. Of course it's killed people. But
Yeah.
it's stupid. It hasn't killed people by overdose, that's the difference. And there are a few doctor cases in the world where the doctors have claimed that it's cannabis overdose that killed the people. Like people with chronic low heartbeat and difficulty breathing. You know, people
Yeah.
like that have taken too much cannabis and fallen into a coma and died. You know, it's really stupid. I hate it when people do that and say that their side has never killed anyone. It's just vile. You know what I mean?
There's got to have been a gay king that killed people.
Mm-hmm. And in the Chinese monarchy, you couldn't get like a high position in the system without being a eunuch, because the emperor was so afraid of losing control over his harem and society that he made everybody who was a close advisor a eunuch. You could say that that was straight people hurting straight people. You could always say that in theory, but in this particular case, the whole system was very gay. If you
Back then, they didn't really have anesthesia, did they, for
No.
for becoming eunuch?
No, they didn't. A lot of people died in the surgeries.
Now they have chemical castration.
Yeah. And if the government was really worried about sexual perverts in the way that they say, they would allow all drugs that reduce sexual desire, like cannabis, without question. Because cannabis, for example, reduces for the most people sexual desire.
Yeah.
So they would allow that just for the sake of reducing the fact that it's gonna cause deviancy if the people are blocked. You know what I mean?
All right.
There's a lot of weird stuff like that they would change their attitude on, but it's mosquito on my hand. Yes, I got it. And there's a lot of weird things that the government does in worldwide things that makes me believe that they're actually more deviant than the people they're supposed to protect us from. Which is one of the reasons why I'm increasing the number of security cameras and decreasing the number of police officers and healthcare workers and Secret Service agents. I feel the police are not our friends when you really look at it. We need enough of them to prevent anything really bad happening, like a complete riot of the people, but that's about it. Oh, I did get the mosquito on my left side. Now the thing on the right side where the mosquito bit me is really itchy.
There's some blood there.
Yeah, that's where it bit me. It didn't sting because it was so deep in the fatty tissue that I almost didn't notice it. It was already quite big when I slapped it. I think we should lower the age of voting, consent and etc. to somewhere along the lines of 11 to 13, but we should increase the punishment for rapes significantly.
Oh.
Like perhaps 4 times greater punishment than we have currently. And we should absolutely in the US get rid of the idea of when the top athletes rape women, that the society forms around the athlete. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That happens very often in the US. We should absolutely get rid of that and similar rape fantasies, you could call them, of the society. And I do think that while we should reduce the age of consent, the protection around people being in a position of inferior power, you know what I mean? Like students and teachers, those relationships should still have the 18-year limit, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think the other person being in a position of power over the other one is something we should be careful of. There are some small things like that that I would keep adjusted even if I were able to like lower the age of voting and consent. But usually blanket crimes that make a certain kind of behavior illegal in all cases, like usually those kinds of laws promote delinquency instead of reduce it, because people think that I'm a criminal already, so you know what I mean. But I do understand that crime needs to be fought against, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a voting age of 13 seems right. Putting the age limit at where it is in like Portugal would probably cause the kind of secondary effects on the crime market and drug market and similar that would be worth aiming for. Because Portugal didn't legalize all drugs, they made it a medical issue when you do drugs. So, for example, if you do drugs occasionally here and there, the medical system won't be interested in you. But if you become a full addict and do drugs like 24/7, in like for example my case, the medical system becomes interested and starts treating you as if you're an addict instead of like a criminal, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But for example, when I was in a beach in Spain, there was a guy just like walking around back and forth in the beach selling drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Children playing. The dog heard them and was like, I want to join. Master system allows me to place the voting age at 15, but it doesn't allow me to place it lower, so there's kind of like a limitation there. But at least it allows me to place it below 18, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about things the public would hate that I would do, we can talk about the fact that I would give terrorists the right to vote. That's something people would absolutely loathe, but I still think we should do it.
So they would vote from jail, or they shouldn't go to jail, you think?
What, terrorists?
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't go to jail. They would just vote like if you're in the country for like 3 months during the time of the election.
Oh.
From the point where they register all the voters to the point where the election is, instead of like showing up a week before and having the people like go through it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I wouldn't allow it for people who are in the country for the exact day of the voting and then leave. There would have to be some kind of like longer time in the country.
yeah.
But I think we should allow it. We should also have in the US language senators and representatives that don't represent any state, that come from the entire country. Like there should be an election for like say 5 countrywide senators, you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
internet senators, you could call them, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Something like that represent the entire population, and that's because in the age of the internet only began like 10 years ago, so I'm not surprised that people haven't caught up to it. But there should be some kind of like internet senators or like online senators, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would probably be a very good thing. Now the spot where that mosquito bit me is itching. Not nice. If we were the type of society I'd want us to be, the US NASA would get the funding of the military and the military would get the funding of NASA, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
If we were the kind of society I'd want us to be. In 10 years we could colonize and start to terraform Mars, Venus and Moon. And in 20 years Mars would be terraformed. Venus would take a couple of 100 years, so with the Moon. But Mars would only take around 20 years for there to be 1/3 of the planet covered by oceans, with a budget of maybe 300 billion a year spread across the entire time period. Such a small investment that it really should be done. You know what I mean?
What would be the return on investment for terraforming Mars?
You would get a new planet, you know?
Oh,
It's there would be very little in terms of like industrial desire to go there, but it would, for example, have almost no pollution limits, pollution standards, environmental protection laws.
yeah.
You know, because there's no life there, so there would be very little of those kinds of things there. And water would be very plentifully available, and it would be powered mostly by nuclear power. So electricity would be cheap.
And you could split it into oxygen and hydrogen.
Uh-huh.
You could use the hydrogen to burn.
Yeah, and oxygen to breathe. Yeah. I've read a lot about terraforming Mars, and it would only take something along the order of a 2 degrees Celsius increase in the temperature of the planet, which I believe is like 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the CO2 gas, which is currently in form of ice under the surface, would start to sublimate or turn straight away into gas instead of a liquid in the middle. And that would condense the atmosphere so much and heat it so much that the water would start to go next. And then there would be an ocean about 1/3 of the surface of Mars.
How do you like reliquefy its core to make it magnetic field?
No, you couldn't do that, but it would, after we get it, like to have an atmosphere, it would take it millions of years for the atmosphere to be like significantly reduced by solar radiation. It wouldn't last billions of years like Earth's atmosphere will, but it would last millions of years, so there would be like no real need to do that. There would be no magnetic field. And in fact, you could probably take like fairly small asteroids composed of water and iron and just drop them into the oceans of Mars like every few years to like have the same amount of mass return to the system that's been removed from it.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be like a small investment. You can't currently reliquefy the core of Mars. If we get some kind of warp technology where we can pass through solid bodies and then just calculate how long a distance you have to warp and then like cancel the warp to be in the interior of the planet, we could send like nuclear bombs or something to the center of the planet and cause that to reliquefy the core. But that's beyond our current understanding. We couldn't even dig deep enough to have the thing happen.
Some alien civilizations probably have the ability to change reality itself, you know. And if you had that technology, you could just program it in, you know.
Yeah.
Mars has a liquid core and it compute.
Yeah, you could do stuff like that. But just like imagining Mars with 1/3 of its entire surface being covered by an ocean in 20 years. That's just amazing to think about that being like doable with half the US military budget year to year over the next 20 years, you know? You would require very little. Basically, like the cheapest way to do that would be to have to build a factory in one of Mars's moons and release like glass pellets that shine on the upper parts of the atmosphere so that it forms a ring around the planet.
Yeah.
And when sunlight hits that, it gets reflected everywhere, including the surface of the planet. That would probably be the cheapest way. It's also possible to form a nuclear power plant on the surface of Mars and release a lot of chlorofluorocarbons into the atmosphere, which would heat it significantly over a short period of time. Both are doable, and neither of them requires a huge investment. If we started today, the first colonists to land on Mars would be 2 years from now, and first significant factories would be around 5 years from now, and then just having the entire atmosphere converted would be like 15 years from that.
Could you give Mars an ozone layer?
Probably. That would probably happen on its own as well, so that the UV.
If there's lightning and stuff, it'll create ozone.
Yeah, I would see there being lightning there. I still think when the US got into the war on terror, they should have declared it like a police matter and said that because they're provoked, they will now like show their true power and start to colonize space like in a true way.
Yeah.
To go like, okay, you guys are trying to attack us, instead of attacking you, we'll build our industry, like we'll show you how powerful we really are, and then just start to like randomly colonize the star system and go like full Futurama on their ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That would have been much more effective than having like a ground war in Middle Asia, you know what I mean?
Yeah. We're losing the war, aren't we, in the Middle East?
Yeah, you are. Because you can't stay in Afghanistan forever. If you do, you will like absolutely certainly lose the thing, because it's such a huge budget drain that it will kill your economy. That's happened to other empires in the past. So you have to form a government in Afghanistan that's like capable of taking out the terrorists on their own. And in the regions where the US military has left Afghanistan, the Taliban are usually able to take out the Afghani army like fairly easily, because the Afghani army doesn't have the weapons and the air support the US army has. So the Afghani like Taliban are able to like sneak all their resources next to a single base and attack it, and pick a next base and attack it, instead of having like a equal match, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a military base gets attacked by like 30 times more Taliban than there's Afghani army soldiers there. So no matter how well they fight, because they don't get air support, they lose. And eventually that means that the Afghani like National Congress, or whatever it's called, I think it's National Congress, has to declare peace with the Taliban, and the Taliban become one of the political powers of Afghanistan, and they get to be voted for and so on. And while that sounds like a good idea, it's going to result in the situation slowly shifting towards the Taliban favor, and the war will be lost. But you should still include the Taliban in the voting process of Afghanistan, you know?
Yeah.
And the war in the Middle East part of the world is going almost exactly as everyone predicted. After a few years after the fall of Iraq government, we got the ISIS guys, and they are basically like hardened military experts fighting just to have the caliphate, which is the nation of all Islamic countries, in a single place. And while we were able to destroy them like in a military way, they got a lot of support from the population. And because the US government doesn't support like the moderate Islamics like the government of Syria, but wants them overthrown and replaced by a democratic government, all the governments in the Middle East are slowly shifting towards being hostile to the US, and that's slowly causing the situation to unravel.
So ISIS, Taliban, and Al-Qaeda are different things?
Basically. Al-Qaeda is the network of former CIA employees that were like Muslims, you know what I mean?
Oh.
When you guys were fighting the Soviets who invaded Afghanistan, you started funding the opposition groups and gave them weapons and training in the US like side of the world, and they formed the Al-Qaeda. That's one of the reasons why people think it was an inside job in the US, the whole World Trade Center thing.
Yeah.
Because it was done by people the US trained and funded for decades, so they're like a little miffed about it, is to put it mildly. ISIS is Islamic State of, I think it was Levant and Syria was the full name, I think. And they're mostly hardened Syrian war veterans who like got fed up with their own government ordering them to kill civilians and rebelled. And then after a while they formed like a really Nazi kind of government on their own and started killing civilians, you know what I mean? So it didn't work for them. And the Taliban are the tribal government of Afghanistan before the US invaded them. Al-Qaeda was like a fairly small group.
Which country has the best hand-to-hand fighters?
It's a good question. Generally speaking, Finland defeats the US in martial arts hand-to-hand, but the best fighters, as far as the world seems to be concerned in hand-to-hand matters, are either Russians or Israelis.
Oh.
But the small countries with a very martial-like history, such as Finland, are very good with them. Like when you put the Finnish expert versus the American expert, it's fairly common for the Finnish expert to win.
Yeah.
But Russia seems to be better, though I'm not sure about that for absolute. And Israel is touted as being like the best, but they don't appear much in like martial arts competitions, so I wouldn't know. I haven't like observed them up close enough to know whether or not they're good.
They use Krav Maga or something.
Yeah. China used to be very good, but since they had their communist revolution, they killed a lot of the old experts and such, so they lost a lot of like technical know-how. One of those cans has turned green. The very furthest away from me on the top has turned green.
Huh.
The air seal was probably broken. But if we combine the world like defense budget and turn it over to a NASA-like corporation where they'd have like 2 trillion a year, we would advance in space so fast that we'd probably have warp drive in a decade, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'd probably have something like that. It's insane how stupidly we are consuming our resources. It's absolutely insane. Like, there seems to be like I wouldn't even call it Christian, but kind of like a monotheist desire to live on a single planet, you know what I mean? That it is wrong or against God that we live on many planets, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There seems to be that kind of like feel in the world. It's of course certain that if we expanded to space and started founding colonies across space, some of those would become independent and eventually declare war on Earth.
Yeah, but what are the chances of finding like a Class M uninhabited planet?
Yeah. Yeah. I think Alpha Centauri has 1 or 2 Class M planets, and they have a civilization based around plants, based on what I've scanned there. It seems like they have one of those types of civilizations there. I distinctly get the sense when I talk with them that they're a plant civilization. I distinctly get that sense from them, which wouldn't surprise me at all. Can you imagine in our lifetime getting a warp engine and humans flying to one of those alien planets where the aliens who historically interfered with Earth live, and going like, hi, we're here now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you imagine that actually happening? People claim that the military is so strongly funded because it gives jobs. But based on like international studies that I've read, for every $1 that you contribute to the military, you get about 30 cents in like civilian economy back to you. But every dollar you contribute, simply removing taxes, nothing else, you get about $1.7 back to the civilian economy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we just like reduce the US military spending to say 100 billion and gave the rest back to taxes, you guys would have an economic growth of like 7% year to year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the main thing that's bothersome about the Earth is that everybody distrusts each other. When somebody comes from another culture and says something like the US should reduce its military spending, they immediately think about what the other culture would gain, you know what I mean?
Oh.
Instead of thinking about, that's an advice, I will see how it would affect my society, you know what I mean? People are like distrustful of others, and that's like the main fault of it. But still, over like the long distance, I would probably prefer that we go forward in time with countries instead of a global union, even though I am kind of in favor of a global union. And it seems to me that the moment we complete the United Nations post-detection protocol, ooh, mosquito. The moment we complete the United Nations post-detection protocol, we will have contact with aliens. It's never been completed, you know?
Oh.
We have a United Nations project called the post-detection protocol, where different countries get together and write like what we should do when we detect the aliens type thing. And it's never been completed. It's unfinished at the moment. But I feel like if we were to complete it at the same moment we complete it, we would realize which of us are aliens to one another, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like, for example, the Polish people to me seem like horses, like the civilization of horses, you know what I mean, based on their history and how they like fit into the European history.
Yeah.
And so on. So I think that if we were to like have like a true post-detection protocol and how we define a human in the sense of like contact with aliens, that it's not just like having a human body, it's like having a human soul, you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
We would be able to distinguish the aliens in our society from the humans. It's probably the reason why it hasn't been completed, you know?
Oh.
Like, for example, the hardcore sci-fi pagans versus the hardcore conservative, like Amish type Christians, are definitely aliens to one another, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And having a kind of protocol on what to do when you encounter that type of alien in your life would probably result in us finding aliens, you know what I mean? And the cultures on Earth would slowly adjust to the fact that they live with aliens already. And then different cultures like the Icelandic Nordic, you know what I mean? The Nordic type aliens would come out of the closets and go like, hi, we're living here, you know what I mean? The different alien cultures would come out of the woodwork and start talking with humans. But we don't have like a good post-detection protocol, so that's not gonna happen. We don't have an understanding of how to react. But like art in the recent short while has made huge strides in understanding aliens, because we've had the X-Men series.
Yeah.
Where the guys are clearly aliens. Because they're no longer Homo sapiens sapiens, they're like Homo superior. So they should be considered aliens to normal humans. And we have to be careful when we contact one of those Homo superior societies that we don't end up the same way the Neanderthal ended. That we don't all like breed with them exclusively and manage to destroy our own race, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
There's 2 more energy drinks in the fridge after I took that one out, and I think one of them is mine and one of them is yours.
I have one left.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That one was already open though. There was an open one in the fridge.
Yeah, I opened it and I didn't want to leave it on the table because there would have been an empty can on the table, and your mother's been fairly strong about not leaving empty cans around.
Yeah.
And even though there would have been drink in it, it would have still appeared like an empty can, so I wanted to place it in the freezer. Or like if the US military spent like 80% of its yearly budget, because it's a national security issue, on simply building renewables, the whole planet would be renewable in a matter of years. Being completely free of the domination of oil for like energy in the US would be an absolutely huge military victory. It would be gargantuan. Being able to survive without oil and using the energy you get from like wind and solar to make artificial oil, and leaving like fracking and such undone.
Yeah.
That would be an absolutely gargantuan military victory, you know.
Yeah.
It would be a Leviathan-sized military victory. I would cheer it like there's no end to it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what would have happened if, after the World Trade Center attack, the US had started to add countries to itself, you know what I mean? Give like countries that want to join it, like senators and congressmen, and just completely like go in favor of adding countries to themselves. I wonder how many would have joined. Probably a sizable chunk of the world would have joined the Americas. Third mosquito. Or fourth, I can't remember. We need to have a global universal research effort to find out what went wrong with the Americas. Why did they provoke that attack? What did they do wrong militarily to make themselves weak enough that that attack?
What attack?
World Trade Center.
Oh.
That's what I would have said as Bush. And after we have a completion of that study, we need to strike back in a controlled military manner against the main evildoers. But it is quite clear that we need to show our economic power, and the only way to do that is to improve our economy. So this is not a military manner in the large scale. I've probably been booed out of office if I said that we need a global study, you know what I mean? But I certainly wouldn't have invaded Afghanistan. I would have sent special forces into the entire region, to all countries, including Pakistan, and have them locate and bring bin Laden in for trial. Then I would have organized a global spectacle of the trial, similar to like the trials we had against the Nazis when the Second World War ended.
Yeah.
Have like a global panel of judges, you know what I mean? Go through the entire effort of like questioning him and having him defend himself in public, and then I would have probably sentenced him to death or lifetime imprisonment, and then I would have called the thing over, you know, the same way they caught like Timothy Bay when he did those council bombings or whatever they were.
Yeah.
And have like, you know, the thing is over. We can't convert the entire population into the Western standard of the world, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are two absolutely enormous problems with how the US responded to the World Trade Center. They shot bin Laden, which is like a gargantuan problem. They should have brought him in for questioning. And they didn't organize a global study on what happened in the World Trade Center. That sparked a huge amount of conspiracy theories, because they didn't allow like a global non-partisan study on what happened that had access to all the material and such. They shipped a lot of the damaged wreck of the building to China for recycling like very quickly.
Well, they turned it into a ship.
Huh?
They turned it into a battleship.
I don't know what they did with it, but I do know they sent a lot of the wreckage to China like almost instantly after the attack. And that was very bad. Those two things are something I would have corrected. But that's about the size of it. But it came as absolutely no surprise to me that bin Laden was in Pakistan. I was like 5 minutes into the war when US starts to threaten Pakistan to give the US overflight into Afghanistan. I realized Pakistan's gonna start defending bin Laden. I was like 5 minutes into the war. I was like, God damn it, man. Which the US said to Pakistan, if they don't give overflight into Afghanistan, they're gonna invade Pakistan as well. And the military government of Pakistan did like an official study on how they would fight against the US and published it, and were like, we couldn't defeat them, and gave them overflight rights. And that was like, you know, when you started threatening Pakistan, I immediately realized that they're going to protect bin Laden. It was like no surprise to anyone in Europe. We were like, everyone in Europe was basically telling the US to go to Pakistan. Like everyone that I know was telling them to go to Pakistan, and that's where they found bin Laden eventually. It's clear he wasn't in Afghanistan as soon as the war began. He wouldn't remain there. It would be completely like ludicrous to remain there. And they also killed bin Laden's family, which was wrong. I understand the desire to respond in a military manner, but that should not have been done. But it's easy for me to say I'm not the guy who lost like 3,000 citizens, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If something like that happened in my simulation, where one of those groups like caused a bombing that killed 3,000, I would probably go apeshit as well. So it's easy to say. But I still want to say for the public record that I prefer for the American empire to continue instead of the Chinese or the Russian empire. I would prefer as a European that Europeans became like a stronger global power, you know what I mean, as a unified state. But we're not ready for it yet. We need to go through at least one huge civil upheaval, perhaps even a civil war in the European Union.
Yeah.
That's considered a civil war instead of war between nations, you know what I mean?
Oh.
Like every nation fighting amongst itself instead of like Germany invading France, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we need to go through one of those before we're ready for like global power. We're being like the good guy state, and that doesn't work, you know what I mean? We're bringing like basically refugees from every country freely into the country, and a lot of countries in the Union are saying that they won't have any of it anymore. Like Hungary, you can't build like a border wall in the European Union, that's illegal. So Hungary built like a chain link fence around their entire nation, but built it like 5 meters inside their nation instead of on the border, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That they're really like pushing it to just signal that they won't have any more refugees, that it's becoming unmanageable. And that's basically the whole left against the right thing. And that's like causing a lot of trouble in Europe. So I predict there will be some kind of civil war in Europe. Russia will take huge advantage of it, but they probably won't invade more than small border territories. They probably won't provoke the entire union to like form against them, you know what I mean? And the US will probably also take advantage of it because the energy market will be something they want to corner with their own natural gas. But Russia will be much better at that because it's closer, you know. And you know, so on. China will become the global superpower in a matter of decades. They will have, regardless of what you do with them with regard to tariffs and such, they will have the status of the global superpower in the next 20 years.
Tariffs don't affect them though, it affects us.
It affects them as well. They lose a lot of money by having to start like domestic industries at lower efficiencies to produce the goods that the tariff like would basically like deny them, and the US makes a lot of money of it, but compared to the fact that there would be no tariffs, they make less money. But it's easier to say that we made like 500 million on tariff instead of like having like we did a trade of like 5% of our global economy and it affected us by 2%, you know what I mean? So it's easier to say that tariffs are like a source of money. In general, the US makes money from the tariffs in China, something on the order of 50 to 100 billion a year. But it's minuscule compared to how much they made when they had open trade, you know. But the problem with open trade on a region where most of the population live in mud huts, you know, there's like 700 million people in China who are dirt poor, and like 500 million who are absolutely rich. They are as rich as the people of New York, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
They don't live in like houses that you live in, they literally live in like skyscrapers. The entire coastline of China is basically one huge city. But the interior is so poor that when you like plop a factory there with the Chinese government stance on like supporting foreign investments, it's going to be so much cheaper for you to produce that it's going to drag the US economy down by a significant amount. And once the China becomes like developed, the next part is going to be Africa. They're going to do the same, and the US is going to have a huge drag on their economy the entire time through. So if the US forms tariffs, they'll make more money and their economy will be in a boom, in a boon period, but they will lose an incredible amount of global support because they won't help the other countries develop. It's the same that I did with denying foreign aid to nuclear powers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'll lose a lot of support globally, but I understand why it's being done, you know what I mean? But tariffs are making money for the US and China, but it's making less money than having open trade, but much more money than having no trade, you know what I mean? And China's going to retaliate by banning certain US products where they're as good, you know, like smartphones and such.
Yeah.
Like the Huawei-Google fight that's going on.
Yeah.
And China has such a large, basically unemployed or small-term farming population that they can build factories at like a lower efficiency to catch up to the tariffs. And China has like 9% public debt. And they have something on the order of like 20 times more than they have public debt in their savings, so they can keep doing this for a long time if they want to, while the US public debt is already starting to cripple the nation, you know what I mean? But Japan is an example of country where public debt has completely crippled the nation. They have like 250% of their GDP in debt, you know what I mean?
Oh.
Even if they sold everything they have to like everyone abroad, they wouldn't be able to pay back their debts. But they're like almost constantly only buying like American dollars and devaluing their own currency. So they're making like their trade possible even though their debt is high. So when the US dollar collapses, if it ever collapses, they can pay back the debt by revaluing their economy, you know what I mean?
Oh.
Because it's like 1 yen for 1/100th of a dollar, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they can like, because their debt is tied to the dollar, they can start to increase the value of their money like fairly easily and use that to pay back the debt. That can be done fairly easily. Japan is much more like trade offensive towards the US than China, but Japan is basically allowing themselves to become a puppet of the US after the Second World War. So the US government doesn't really mind it, you know what I mean? They treat it like a colony, you know what I mean? But they are much more offensive in trade matters with the US than the Chinese are. The Chinese are trying to maintain a situation where everybody in the world likes them. They are very much trying to do that, so they're very hesitant to go to like a trade war with the US. But give them 10-20 years and they'll have a military budget larger than the US military budget, at which point basically the only option remaining is that the US and the European Union merge to one superstate, and that's going to be the new world order, I think.
Oh.
Then they'll have a larger economy than China for the next 20 years, and then they'll probably get Russia into the Union as well. And then they'll have another 10 years, and then China's economy will start to slow down because they've developed like the entire continent. And then there will be a huge fight for Africa. 53 minutes. Once again, a longer thing than I thought. But yeah, in general, I would prefer the American empire over the Chinese empire, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you can... the US empire is like predictable. They do things like if they align with a neutral power and tell them to invade another, you can be pretty sure that they're going to invade the neutral power after the invasion is done, like they did with Iraq. They gave them the green light to invade Kuwait, and as soon as they did, they officially said that they never gave the green light and invaded Iraq. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been a while since the American empire has done something like the invasion of Tibet and killing like a couple of 100,000 Tibetans. You know what I mean?
Huh.
It's been a while since they've done something like that, so it's
I
humanitarian.
thought the U.S. invaded Tibet?
No, China invaded Tibet.
Yeah. Oh.
I was referring to like doing something similar, like invading the Native American territories.
Oh.
It's been a while since the US has done anything of that nature. They do go to war with neutral powers, but it seems to be lesser than what like the Chinese did with Tibet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they seem to be like wars in the sense that they're actual wars. But you can basically understand how little the world like civilian population that's at war with the US wants to be at war with the US because they don't do like general terrorist attacks in the US. You know what I mean?
What were you gonna say?
It would be possible for like Iraqi militias to do like random terrorist attacks in the US to a much larger scale than they do now, but it seems Iran is preventing them from doing that.
Did you know China made it illegal for the Tibetans to reincarnate without permission?
No, but that wouldn't surprise me at all. That would be one of those things where I would have the post-detection protocol. You know what I mean? It seems to be like a war between two alien species. China said that they have the right to pick the next incarnation of the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama has said that his next incarnation will be in India or somewhere along that region instead of in China.
Oh yeah.
So they're fighting about that. And I wouldn't like to be under a communist dictatorship. Communism would work well if it's tied with popular votes. But when you don't have popular votes and you have communism, you essentially create cronyism. Or like, it's not paternalism, but it's the opposite of merit is there's two types of government, those that reward merit and those that reward closeness to the leader. And I can't remember what it's called when you have closeness to the leader that they reward.
Oh, I don't know.
It's not paternalism, but it's one of those things. It's close to that. And a communist dictatorship without like popular votes on what's going to be done next creates that kind of thing. I think the biggest problem with the US right now is not the voting age thing, which I think will probably be surprising to many that I don't consider that the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the war on drugs, because there's no like legal precedence in a republic why people shouldn't be able to do something to themselves in their own privacy.
Yeah.
So that's probably like, because it's such a fundamental problem with like the state being a republic, but not allowing people to do things to their own bodies, you know what I mean? You should be allowed to do anything to your own body that doesn't like have the strict possibility of dangers for other selves. If it's like a secondary danger, like you going nuts and harming another self, that shouldn't count. But you shouldn't, for example, be allowed to inject Ebola into yourself and walk into an airfield, you know what I mean? That there should be those kinds of limitations, but there shouldn't be like a limitation of what drugs you're allowed to do.
Did you ever see 12 Monkeys?
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
He got away at the end.
Yeah. There's even a TV show about the 12 Monkeys, I think. It's a lot of mosquitoes that have bit me in a fairly short period of time. It's like 4 in an hour, you know what I mean? It's quite a high number. If I were to stay out there on a blanket and take the sun in, I would take like 20 bites in like 4 hours, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm taking my mom into town tomorrow.
Okay. I feel like we could probably go to the store today and buy some energy drinks, but I don't know for sure. I haven't decided what I feel about it yet. Those would be my last monies. What are you gonna get in town?
She wants to get some stuff, I'm not sure.
Okay. But really, can you imagine a space program with the funding of $500 billion with the goal of colonizing our solar system as fast as possible? Can you imagine a space program like that?
You can't terraform the asteroid belt, can you?
You can make habitation there, but you can't terraform it. Mosquito, that would be the fifth one. You can't terraform it, but you can make like colonies out there on the largest asteroids that mine the region.
Yeah.
It's very well covered in the series Expanse.
Yeah.
Where there's like 3 societies in the solar system: the Martians, the Earth people, and the Belters who live on the asteroid belt. And the Belters are basically the dirt poor people who like get a lot of medical complications from living in low gravity and so on.
Oh.
But they are like humans in the same way that they're all humans, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we could, for example, terraform some of the moons of Jupiter, for example.
Yeah.
The magnetic field would cause huge problems for humans, but we could live underwater on like Europa or something. Humanity becoming a space-faring race for real would be like a huge thing.
And Mercury's too close to colonize, isn't it?
Yeah, but we would probably build like mining outposts there on the dark side.
Yeah.
We would probably do something like that. And solar panels in orbit, because they would get a huge benefit to their efficiency. And cloud cities on Venus and dome cities on Mars until the atmosphere is thick enough to allow you to survive there with a breather. Then the domes would be removed. But for initially, Mars would have to have dome cities. For nothing else, these sandstorms would destroy everything without a dome. I keep looking at my feet to try to see if mosquitoes biting on me. I don't sense them when they bite at the moment. My skin has become so like itchy all over that I don't sense them when they bite, but after a while of sitting on me I sense them and then I slap them. There was an interesting study in the US where they wanted to see how many people support feminism and how many people oppose feminism. And feminism got an 8 to 24% support rating and a 33 to 25% opposition rating. Women opposed it with a percentage of 25 and the general population opposed it with a percentage of 33. And they only got a support rating of 8 to 24%. So more people, like 3 times more people, oppose feminism in women, and somewhere along the order of twice to 4 times on the entire population. And that didn't surprise me at all. People are thinking that feminism has gone too far, that it's a group that is like composed of a small percentage of the women population that wants to take advantage of the male population. People are starting to get that idea. That's why feminism has pushed too far too fast, and they're getting a huge backlash. Still recording?
Yeah.
How do you feel about going to the gas station today?
I don't know if I feel like it. We just went, didn't we go yesterday?
Yeah, I'm also a little undecided. Could have probably bought energy drinks with the rest of my money and prevent this entire trip from happening. I should really take the metal protector away from this lighter and adjust the flame to be larger by like manually adjusting it to be larger, and then put the metal thing back. But last time I did that, the whole lighter exploded.
Oh.
And I let go of the lighting switch, the thing popped out and the metal and everything flew everywhere, and the lighter was broken, so I'm not gonna do that.
Oh.
But there's like half the gas remaining, and the flame is so small that it's almost unusable.
It's getting to the bottom of your bowl though.
Yeah, it's getting there, but it has to be held really close, and like any kind of even small wind blows it out. Well, there's a lot left. Ow, ow, ow. Ow. Hope those don't cause any fires. But to be honest, if I was like the dictator of the United States, I still wouldn't put like 500 billion into the space program. I would put perhaps 200 billion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't reduce the US military spending to something like 200 billion. I would reduce it to exactly 2% of the GDP, which is the NATO limit.
Yeah.
And say that we're at peace, we don't need more than that, but everybody needs to have the 2%. And then I would very strongly lean on the guys in NATO who don't have it at 2%. Basically tell them to have it on 2% or we'll get the Russians to invade them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's about the size of it. That would be a good military investment. It would reduce the defense spending by around 150 to 200 billion. I would probably spend half of it on the space program and half of it on reducing government spending and improving infrastructure and renewables, but that's about it.
If Russia was an ally to the U.S., could they join NATO, or they couldn't because they're not in North America?
North Atlantic.
Or North Atlantic.
North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They could join, I think.
If they were an ally.
I think anybody who's like a true ally of the US would probably be allowed to join NATO. While I dislike many of Trump's strategies, I am in awe of him starting the Space Force, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, nice! You guys are actually starting the space military, you know what I mean? It's against like every treaty ever made with regards to space, but it's still like, you guys are starting the Planetary Defense Fund, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are actually worried about the aliens invading you, because that's like the only reason you would do this, because every other country is primarily engaged by the ground forces, you know what I mean?
My dad said they have shield technology against missiles and stuff.
In a way, the best kinds of shields that I've heard, it's not a mosquito, but that is a mosquito, it's on another leg. The best kind of shield technology I've heard is during the Iraq War, there were some tanks that drove up to the Baghdad International Airport, and the Iraqi army shot at them with like rocket-propelled grenades, like those shoulder launchable things that are against tanks. And they like went in a straight line, and as soon as they got within a specific distance of the tank, they like misfired and started going in weird directions. That's the best shield technology I've heard. But if you talk about intercontinental ballistic missiles, the shield is like you shooting those missiles down with your missiles instead of like an energy barrier. But I've heard that it is possible to make like a tank-sized shield generator that like messes with the guidance of rocket-propelled grenades. So it's not
like it would be like if you touched it, it would be like hitting solid.
No. It's probably some kind of fast-spinning electromagnetic field that catches like metal objects coming towards it and like deflects them. That's probably what it is. It's not like a solid barrier. And the US missile defense shield that they're building against random ballistic missiles is just the US detecting the missiles and shooting them out from like when they are like in the ballistic trajectory. But it's much cheaper to make missiles that can avoid ballistic shields than it is to build a ballistic shield. That's why nobody ever built them during the Cold War. So, because you can fairly cheaply make missiles that like zigzag when they go in like a ballistic orbit, you know what I mean? You can fairly cheaply make that. And that's why the missile defense shield only basically works against countries with primitive missile technology. So it's against countries like Iran or Syria or somebody like that.
Have you seen those missiles they shoot out of a ship? They shoot it straight up and then it turns 90 degrees. And
Cruise missiles, those are nice.
You know those CO2 cartridges they use for for pellet guns and stuff?
Yeah.
I learned if you punch a hole in that and let all the gas out and fill it with match heads.
Yeah.
Like of the red match heads, cut off all the heads, fill it like full of them.
Yeah.
Put a one of those rocket fuses or something that you put power to it and it ignites. In there, the match heads will make the CO2 take off like a rocket.
Yeah. Did you know that those large containers of like propane, those things that they use when they need to weld things, those large propane canisters?
Acetylene?
I have no idea what's in them, but I think it's propane. It could be some other form of gas. But those large containers anyway that look like missiles basically.
It's acetylene.
Yeah. Okay, if you put them on their side and hit the head so that it comes off, it has enough force to go through a concrete wall.
Yeah,
it goes with a huge speed. It's very dangerous. It goes through a concrete wall, you know what I mean?
I'm still amazed at how submarines can go down and then can still go back up. Don't they have to let all their air out to go down and then...
No, there's a compressed air canister inside that they use to push the water out of the system. There's like water containers on its side that they fill with water because then it gets heavier than air and starts to sink. But they have compressed air cartridges in them that they use to push the water out of the tubes and then fill them with pure air and then just close the tube so they don't like sink anymore. That's called a ballast.
Can they go up and down indefinitely?
Yeah, basically. Eventually the ballast runs out, but you have like, if you have it like at such a level of water pressure that'll go like 30 meters deep, you can just like use the guidance turbines to go up and down. You can do that.
Go in the currents where the sea turtles take and ride the Australian current, whatever.
Yeah, most submarines actually follow the ocean currents when possible because they make travel a lot easier.
Yeah.
So they're like highways in the sea.
They say some of our changing weather or changing climate can affect El Nino, and that can really screw up.
If that thing goes bad and starts to go really bad, the entire South American continent will be fucking uninhabitable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
we should really use the US defense budget or some kind of other state budget to buy the entire Amazon rainforest and make it a preserved area. So that people don't cut the rainforest, because if it's cut, it'll never grow back as a rainforest. It'll become like a grassland, and then it'll be fallow ground because the soil is so poor. It's like ultra poor soil because everything is contained in the trees. There's like no topsoil underneath, you know what I mean? So when the trees are cut off and sold for like lumber, there's like 5 years of farmable land there, and then it's like hard as a desert.
Why don't they do renewable forests instead of that?
More expensive.
They still make a profit. Why do they have to have a bigger profit?
Actually, the biggest profit would be exploring the rainforest for medical compounds.
Yeah.
That makes like a huge amount of profit for a very small like investment. But most of the farmers who burn the forest and slowly expand inward are poor, so they can't do stuff like that. The money would come for the state instead of the poor farmers, and the state considers mostly the Amazon rainforest to be land that they need to colonize, you know what I mean? That they need to like inhabit the whole region and turn it into a grassland so they'll be rich, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They think the cost of like global environmental destruction is minuscule compared to the fact that they'll get a lot more money from having a fully inhabited country.
I think the president of Brazil wants to clear cut the whole country.
Yeah, he's insane. The president of Brazil is completely nuts. He's like, in a bad way, completely nuts. He's turned on a lot of other countries against historic treaties, and he's been like very friendly to the US in a way that he's compromising his own national security and doing very stupid things like that. You can always help another country like the US, but you shouldn't compromise your own nation to do so.
Yeah.
You should always retain your own interest in mind, at least like on some kind of basic level. My left side hasn't gotten in the neck the same kind of locked up feeling that I got at the homeless shelter. It's a little locked up and it's a little lower, but I haven't gotten the same kind of locked up feeling that I got in the homeless shelter, so that's good.
Is the couch easier to sleep on than the beds over there?
Probably. The beds are really hard. You're not even allowed to put your own curtains in your room, you know what I mean?
Oh.
That's like... You can't paint the walls, you can't paint the windows, you can't do like almost anything in your own room. When I was living like at my own apartment, I painted the windows. I like painted angels and like fractal things on the windows, so that when the sun shone into the apartment, it looked like one of those old-timey churches. It was really nice. And I had a huge amount of plants on the window edges. And I had like a softball net with like large holes, not one of those small tennis nets. And had that at the top of the window. I nailed it to the top so that there was like a net going downwards, and I had vines that I like plotted through the thing so that they grew like all over the net, so that you couldn't see into my apartment from the like balconies right next to it. It was very nice. I liked it. I liked the apartment very much. It's one of the things I hate about weed, because that's clearly the reason why I lost my apartment. But on the other hand, it's given me joy like nothing else, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a 50-50. It's a very hard debate. But I still do think like, and I've thought for a couple of years that I need to eventually quit weed. I won't go cold turkey in the sense that I'll never smoke it again and become one of those Christians who preach about the dangers of alcohol, you know what I mean? I won't go that far, but I won't buy it anymore in like a large quantity, and if somebody offers, I'll smoke it, but that's about the size of it.
They had a spoof on College Humor where someone was doing heroin. They was trying to get his friends to do it, and it was like a powder or something, and he sniffed. But heroin's only injectable, isn't it?
No, opiates are also a powder. You can do that. I've snorted powdered opiates, but it gives you a really bad feeling for like the first 5 to 10 times that you use it, like a really bad feeling.
Yeah.
You become completely like disentangled from your body, and you feel like you're floating in this void, and it feels like very lonely. But after you do it enough times, it starts to feel really good. And my friend was like edging me on to do it for a very long time, and I said after, like, eventually that okay, I'll do it once, but you can already see that it's going to be a bad experience for me. I didn't like that he wanted me to do that. It felt like an offensive thing. It's like me saying to you every time we're out here, smoke this tobacco, hit you like it, you know what I mean? Eventually you'll become very upset about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I did it out of a sense of community with him. But I wouldn't recommend it. If you really want like a mind-blowing experience with drugs, first do a small amount of weed over the course of like a couple of weeks that you get adjusted to how weed feels like. Then do some kind of highly serotonin increasing drug like LSD or mushrooms. And at the same time, just when you're about to pass out from the strength of the drug, because that it'll make you pass out, have a very small amount of amphetamine or methamphetamine like taken into your system. I had like a piece of paper that I like swirled in a very small container of liquid methamphetamine, and I placed it on my tongue for like 10 seconds, and I immediately woke up to like full awakeness and then put it back. And I had a very large dose of LSD, and that's when I got the God experience. That's probably the strongest drug that you can do. It's probably stronger than ayahuasca, I think.
Oh.
Ayahuasca is kind of like a very deep, very slow experience, while that was like very powerful and very quick, you know what I mean? But even years later, I'm still trying to rebuild myself from the experience I had. It was like too powerful a God experience. Mosquito on your arm. You got it. That was incredible.
No, I didn't.
Ah. We've been sitting out here for so long that we'll probably need to turn on the porch light soon.
How much longer are you going to be out here?
I don't know, half an hour, maybe.
Oh.
Is that okay with you?
Maybe I might go in before too long. It's an hour, 22 minutes.
Okay. Half an hour seems about right. I feel like the US military budget is in a way my like overactive need to defend myself, you know what I mean? When I get into a fight, I want to know that I have the ability to defend myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like the force of the defense of myself in a just fight comes from the US military budget, you know what I mean? And I feel like my desire to defend myself is what causes the US military budget to be so strong. So if I was more balanced and less like keen to defend myself and more keen to explore, I would probably see the US military budget become decreased and NASA's and other budgets become increased, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have that kind of connection with the US, I feel. I feel like I may not grind more, but it's possible I'll grind one more hit, but this base is still quite full. I would have to say pound for pound, if both sides had equal military spending, the Finnish military would be much stronger than the American military, I feel, if both had the same spending on them. When I see like exercises with the US and Finnish military at the same time, I'm like astonished by how inept the US military is. When they're in the field fighting the Taliban or somebody like that, they're very well connected and they're a very integrated unit, something we don't have in our military in the same way. But when they're fighting our military in field exercises, their tactics and strategies are straight out of the Second World War, you know what I mean? they're very like old, and their strategies and such, they don't seem to be adjusted to the modern world.
Is that your defenses?
Just the military, just the Finnish military, not my guys. When it's my guys, the 3 platoons against the US military, I win about 90% of the engagements, but it's a small specialized unit. It's like putting like Halliburton against the US military, you know what I mean?
Oh.
They would absolutely ruin the units they come in close contact with, but they would be destroyed by air power, you know what I mean? What is the virtue of a proportional response? It's not virtuous, Mr. President, it's all there is. It's not all there is. There's the disproportionate response. Are you suggesting we bomb Damascus International Airport? It's from West Wing. When the Syrian Defense Ministry shoots down an airplane of the Americans with like the main physical doctor of the U.S. president inside.
Yeah.
And the U.S. president decides to retaliate against Syria, and the military guys are giving him like insufficient scenarios where they strike against small targets and such. And he's like, haven't they already evacuated those sites, and don't they know that we're coming for them in this manner? Like, shouldn't we strike against something larger? And the military guys are like, yeah, we could level the international airport, but that would be like a huge overstep from a first-time president, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he eventually calms down and authorizes the proportional response. In the effect that when you kill a single American, we'll kill a single of your people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of leveling the entire airport or like killing thousands. One of the guys says that because the US is the only remaining superpower in the world, that the US president could rule over the entire world like Charlemagne, but that other people in the US would start armies against him. It's a very powerful scene. I was invited to go to one of those black guys' wedding when I came here.
Yeah.
He said that if I don't come here, the wedding will be in the 6th month. And I'm like invited as an honored guest, you know what I mean? It was a little sad that they were on top of each other. I'd already reserved the tickets by then. If I hadn't, we'd reserved the tickets by then. If we hadn't, I would have probably postponed it until I can go to the wedding.
Yeah.
That would have probably been a good idea. It was a bit of a hassle to get to the US, but it was less than I was expecting. The border guard guys were very nice. They were very curious about how I'm going to support myself in the US without money, but the letter you wrote me was like the deciding factor. They were like, so this is what's happening. And then they called you and was like, the phone conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, and he was like, yeah, you're allowed to come to the country. And then he opened the box and gave me my passport and my ticket and said to pick up my stuff and go to the flight. I was like, thank you. They were very nice. I have nothing bad to say about them. The US police force has been a little weird. On the other hand, when I watch videos online, I get a lot of the police force being on my side. And on the other hand, when I interact with the police force, I see a lot of stuff that to me seems corrupt, you know what I mean? They've been a little weird. The US military has been very good to me. They almost never engage me. They're almost always on my side, you know what I mean? Occasionally I do have engagements with them, but it's rare. The justice system I haven't really gone through, but the Anglo-American health system has been like virtually unheard of positive towards me. Like things like that you could stop your medication if you wanted, stuff like that are like unheard of in my country. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm learning that's better than in my country. That's what I like about traveling.
Yeah.
Still can't believe some of those guys in Bringforth said that I shouldn't come to the US because I don't think it's the best country in the world. I was like, it's insane, man. Why would you only visit the best country in the world, you know what I mean? Because I said that like the Human Development Index globally is seen to be the highest in Singapore. And they said, why don't I go there and why do I go to the US? I was like, shut up, you know what I mean? I was just very stupid. The US needs a government with the humanitarian abilities of Obama and the negotiation abilities of Obama with the economic abilities of Trump. The US needs a president like that. That's distinctly left-wing libertarian, that's as smart in economic matters as the conservative of the conservative. The US needs a president like that, then it would be like an amazing place in like 4 years.
Bernie Sanders isn't that, is he? Liberal or whatever?
He's kind of liberal, but not like very liberal. And his liberalism doesn't seem to be the traditional where things for the citizens of the country should be legal as far as possible. But it seems to be more in the camp of like Medicare for illegal immigrants, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Which is insanely stupid. They're illegal immigrants, they're criminals when you like cross the border illegally, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They aren't legal immigrants. I hate the fact that the US is giving more rights to the illegal immigrants because it's making my legal immigration into the country much more difficult, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's damaging me in many ways. But it's once again one of those things the Greens are doing. Like those guys who lifted a Mexican flag and a upside down bloodied American flag next to the ICE center, you know what I mean? And they were like, you know, free them all and get them into the country and, you know, stuff like that. And I was like, oh my god, these people are completely bollocks. They need to be put in a cage. And based on a lot of the sci-fis I've seen, I support like many small countries instead of one large country. Because when you have one large country, it's usually like in the long run easier to take down militarily than a union of small countries, you know what I mean? That's why I support the European Union model instead of the US model. And I don't support the globalists, even though I have a lot of affinity for them. In many ways it would be nice if there was just one global government, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be like the United Nations is going to give a lot, is going to gain a lot more power in the coming years, but it won't become a world government. they'll do many basically single-shot humanitarian projects like vaccinating everyone in Africa against every basic disease in Africa, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it won't say things like the US government should have this particular leader, you know what I mean? So in that regard I support the UN, but it's not going to be a world government. You know, the US hasn't paid its debts to the United Nations in like 15-20 years. They haven't paid their like admission fees and so on to the United Nations. I think that's a very bad idea. Because they founded the United Nations, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a very bad idea to like destroy your treaty credibility like that.
How much is the annual fee?
It's like 300 million or something. It's a minuscule amount in the US budget.
They should take some of the military budget to that.
Yeah, they should. And in general, they should take the military budget to uphold treaties that are like preferred to be upheld, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they should support the poorest countries that are in NATO so that they can get their military spending to 2% a year, you know what I mean? Like start data centers or some kind of industry there that's like not beneficial for the US as much as starting it somewhere else, and having them take the money in on the condition that they boost their military spending to 2% of GDP. That should happen. But Europeans are very hesitant to start allowing everybody in Europe to boost their military spending because they're afraid of Germany. If Germany actually remilitarizes again, it's going to be really weird for Europe, you know what I mean?
Oh.
So Germany's military spending is like 1.4% of GDP, and almost all branches of their military are completely undermanned and underfunded. Like their ground army is like minuscule, you know what I mean, compared to their size. So if they boost it to 2%, they would probably have like a very large, successful army. Finland is one of the few European Union nations with a defense budget around 2% of GDP.
I'm gonna go in and feed Loki and get some water.
Okay, are you gonna come out again?
I don't know. Probably not right away. I'm gonna stop this.
Okay, bye everyone.